Green alien blood sprayed onto the cockpit glass as Breen fighter ships disintegrated under a hail of Philip Coleman's missiles, their advanced force fields useless against humanity's savage weaponry. Philip's GR-97 fighter barreled through the expanding debris field, running dangerously low on fuel and oxygen as he desperately searched the wreckage for any sign of his wingman Mike's ship. He had to find Mike. He couldn't lose him. Not again. The ruins of destroyed Breen and human ships spun around his viewport. An ominous quiet hung over the carnage, broken only by the faint beep of his scanner. Philip clenched his jaw, sweat beading on his forehead. His thoughts drifted to the angry words he'd exchanged with his teenage son, Jason, before this mission. Jason had stormed out, shouting that his dad cared more about the war than his own family. The memory stung, but Philip pushed it aside. Jason didn't understand. None of them did. This war would determine humanity's very survival, and Philip would be damned if he let those scaly Breen bastards wipe them out. A blip. The scanner caught a weak signal, an emergency beacon. It had to be Mike. Philip yanked the throttle, sending his ship hurtling towards a dense asteroid field. Amy, the ship AI, blared a proximity warning. An impact at this speed would tear the GR-97 apart. Philip silenced her with a stab of his finger. A 95% chance of death still meant a 5% chance Mike could be saved. He wouldn't abandon his friend, even if it killed him. The fighter shuddered as its shields absorbed asteroid strikes. The beacon grew louder. He was close. Amy reported critical damage to the right thruster. Philip gripped the stick until his knuckles whitened. Almost there. Hold together. Then the signal stopped. The asteroids went silent. Philip's breath caught in his throat. No. Please no. Philip's heart raced as he struggled to stabilize his ship's systems, red warning lights flashing across the control panel. His mind whirled with the sickening possibility that Mike had been captured by a Breen patrol. A sudden ping from the sensors jolted him alert. An incoming Breen cruiser closing fast. The choice hung before him. Flee to safety, leaving Mike to an unknown fate, or confront the cruiser head-on in his crippled fighter. Philip's jaw clenched. He punched the throttle, sending his ship hurtling towards the Breen vessel. Opening a comm channel, he played his last desperate card. Breen cruiser, this is Commander Philip Coleman of the Terran Fleet. You have one of our pilots. Release him immediately or be destroyed. The screen crackled to life, revealing the insectoid visage of the Breen commander. Her compound eyes glittered with malice. You dare threaten us, human. Your primitive weapons are useless against our shields. Your friend will make a fine slave in the Breen mines. Philip's finger hovered over the self-destruct button. He set the countdown for 60 seconds and transmitted it to the Breen ship. My weapons may not pierce your shields, but at this range your cruiser won't survive the blast from my ship's reactor overload. Release my wingman now, or we both die. The Breen commander's mandibles twitched, uncertainty flickering across her alien features. Philip watched the countdown tick away, heart pounding, finger poised to abort. 5, 4, 3. A small craft emerged from the Breen ship, Mike's battered fighter. Philip stabbed the abort button and wrenched his ship towards Mike's, the cruiser looming in the background. The docking clamps engaged with a shudder. Philip's shoulders sagged in relief, even as the Breen ship ominously maintained position behind him. The Breen ship hung in the distance, a looming threat amidst the rubble of the asteroid field. Philip's hands flew across the controls, manipulating the unfamiliar Breen programming as he fought to breach their systems. Mike's voice crackled through the comms, strained as he worked to keep his own ship functioning. "Commander, we need to move," Mike shouted. "That cruiser will have torpedoes in the air any second." "I know, I'm trying to buy us time," Philip replied through gritted teeth. His heart hammered against his ribs as he struggled to make sense of the alien code scrolling across the screen. Suddenly, his blood ran cold. A stealth torpedo, invisible to human sensors, already locked on his ship's reactor. "Mike, they've got a torpedo on me, stealth tech. I can't disarm it." "Shit, what's the plan?" Philip's mind raced. calculations and trajectories flashing through his thoughts. We run, the outpost isn't far. If we push the engines... Are you insane? In this shape we'll fly apart. It's our only shot. The two ships, trailing debris and venting atmosphere, lurched into motion, engines straining as they clawed for speed. In the cockpit, alarms screamed warnings of imminent structural failure. Philip's hands shook on the throttle. "Evasive maneuvers," Mike yelled over the cacophony. "We have to shake that torpedo." "Negative. We need all power to engines." "God damn it, Philip, you're going to get us both killed." Philip opened his mouth to argue when a blinding flash erupted behind them. He flinched, expecting oblivion, but instead of the torpedo, it was the unmistakable signature of a point defense laser. His console lit up with an incoming transmission from the outpost. A familiar voice filled the cockpit. "Dad, is that you?" Philip's heart seized. "Jason?" "I got your back, Dad. Nailed that torp with the new PD system. Bring her on home." Emotion choked Philip's throat as he guided his battered ship towards the hangar bay, Mike close behind. As they touched down, warning klaxons reverberated through the outpost's halls. "Brain fleet incoming, all hands to battle stations." Philip stumbled from the cockpit, his legs unsteady on solid ground. Mechanics and soldiers scrambled in barely controlled chaos, prepping for a desperate last stand. Jason emerged from the crowd, his young face tight with grim determination. He pulled Philip into a side corridor. "Dad, I know how we can beat them. I've been working on something, a secret project. We've cracked Breen weapons tech. I have a plan." In the hangar bay, Philip and Jason huddled over a holoschematic, the ominous shapes of Breen warships, looming ever closer. Jason's fingers flew across the controls, zooming in on the flagship. "There," he said, pointing to a glowing node deep within the ship's structure. "The central computer core. If we can get the nanobots there, they'll spread through the whole fleet." Philip nodded grimly. "What about the outpost? We can't just leave them defenseless." Jason met his father's gaze. "The nanobots are our only chance. We have to try." Alarms blared as the first Breen shot slammed into the outpost shields. Mike sprinted into the hangar, his face smudged with grease. "I've got the shuttle prepped. Let's move." They piled into the captured craft, its alien contours bathed in eerie green light. As Philip's hands flew over the unfamiliar controls, the hangar exploded around them, consumed by searing plasma. Gritting his teeth, Philip punched the thrusters, sending them rocketing into the chaos of battle. Breen fighters swarmed like angry insects, their cannons stitching the void with deadly light. Juking and weaving, Philip threaded the shuttle through the maelstrom, the stolen Breen codes masking their approach. The flagship loomed before them, a monstrous spider crouched at the heart of its web. They docked with a shudder, the airlock hissing open to reveal a nightmarish labyrinth of pulsing conduits and alien machinery. Breen soldiers surged to meet them, their insectoid armor glinting in the sickly light. Philip and Mike leapt into action, their rifles spitting fire as they charged into the fray. Breen warriors fell, their carapaces shattered by high-caliber rounds. Jason darted past, sprinting for the computer core, a small device clutched in his hand. A towering Breen warrior loomed before him, its razor-sharp talons slashing the air. Jason ducked and rolled, sliding beneath the creature's legs and leaping to his feet behind it. The Breen whirled, its mandibles clicking in rage, but Jason was already gone, racing down the pulsing corridor. He burst into the computer chamber, a vast spherical space dominated by a pulsing nexus of glowing conduits. As he approached the core, a familiar figure stepped from the shadows. "Foolish child," Ilara hissed, her compound eyes glittering with malice. "You think your pitiful toys can match the might of the Breen?" Jason stood his ground, his jaw set with resolve. "You underestimate us, these nanobots. They're based on your technology, the tech you discarded as worthless." Ilara recoiled as if struck, her mandibles quivering with rage. In that instant of distraction, Jason lunged, slamming his hand onto the upload panel. The core pulsed, shimmering with sickly light as the nanobots poured into the system. The ship shuddered, alarms shrieking as the nanobots spread like wildfire, devouring conduits and vital systems. Explosions rocked the chamber, sending showers of sparks cascading from ruptured panels. Jason sprinted for the exit, the deck buckling beneath his feet. He burst into the corridor to find Philip and Mike, their armor scorched and battered, fighting a desperate rearguard action as they fell back to the shuttle. A savage cry rang out behind them. Ilara charged through the smoke and flames, her talons extended, her face contorted with hatred. Philip shoved Jason behind him, bracing for the impact. The deck plates beneath Ilara's feet suddenly gave way, dissolving into a yawning chasm as the nanobots consumed the ship's structure. She scrabbled at the edge, her legs kicking futilely as she fought to pull herself up. For a moment Philip hesitated, staring down at his nemesis. Then he turned away, pushing Jason and Mike into the waiting shuttle. As the hatch slammed shut behind them, Ilara's scream of rage echoed through the disintegrating ship. They blasted free from the dying flagship, the shuttle shuddering as it fought to escape the expanding debris field. Behind them, the Breen fleet writhed in its death throes, ships crumbling and exploding as the nanobot infestation spread. In the shuttle's cockpit, Philip sagged back in his seat, his face etched with exhaustion. Jason lay a hand on his father's shoulder, a gesture of silent understanding passing between them. But there was no time to rest. As the outpost sensors registered the Breen fleet's collapse, a new threat appeared at the edge of the system. A vast, unidentified vessel, dwarfing even the mightiest Breen warship, winked into existence, its hull pulsing with malevolent energy. Philip straightened in his seat, his face grim. The fight, it seemed, was far from over. As they raced through the disintegrating Breen ship, ducking falling debris and leaping over gaping chasms, Philip pushed Jason ahead of him. The shuttle lay just ahead, its hatch beckoning like the gates of salvation. Suddenly Ilara emerged from the billowing smoke, her weapon leveled at Jason's chest. Time seemed to slow. Philip saw Jason's eyes widen in fear, his body frozen. In that crystalline moment, Philip knew what he had to do. He lunged forward, shoving Jason into the waiting shuttle. His fingers danced across the control panel, sealing the hatch with a resounding clang. Jason scrambled to his feet, his face pressed against the viewport, screaming soundlessly. Philip turned to face Ilara, his own rifle raised. The Breen commander's compound eyes glittered with malevolence, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Jason," Philip said, his voice steady even as his heart raced, "I'm proud of you, son, of the man you've become. You have to live to keep fighting for all of us." Tears streamed down Jason's face as he pounded on the unyielding hatch. Philip drank in the sight of his son one last time, committing every detail to memory. Then he charged. His rifle bucked in his hands, spitting hot death at Ilara. The Breen commander staggered back, her carapace cracking under the onslaught. But she rallied, her own weapon unleashing a storm of plasma. Searing pain exploded in Philip's chest as he closed the distance. He slammed into Ilara, knocking her weapon away. They grappled, a tangle of human and insectoid limbs rolling across the buckling deck. With a savage twist, Philip wrenched Ilara's arm behind her back. The snap of breaking chitin drowned out by the scream of tortured metal. Ilara thrashed, her mandibles snapping inches from Philip's throat. Darkness crept into the edges of Philip's vision as he fumbled for the grenade at his belt. Blood bubbled from his lips, his life ebbing away with each ragged breath. His fingers closed around the grenade's smooth surface. With the last of his strength, he primed the detonator and wedged it into Ilara's shattered armor. The world slowed to a crawl. Philip locked eyes with Jason through the shuttle viewport, a final moment of connection. Then he let himself fall back into Ilara's embrace, the grenade pinned between them. A flash, a roar, searing heat and unimaginable force. The shuttle bay vanished in a maelstrom of fire and shrapnel. In the shuttle, Mike wrenched Jason away from the viewport, his face grim. His fingers danced across the controls, engaging the emergency undocking sequence. The shuttle lurched, tearing free from the dying Breen ship. As they hurtled away, Jason watched through tear-blurred eyes as the nanobots completed their devastating work. The once mighty Breen fleet crumbled, reduced to lifeless husks, drifting in the endless black. The shuttle limped back to the ruined outpost, its hull scored and battered. As they touched down, a ragged cheer went up from the soot-streaked survivors. Jason and Mike stumbled out to a hero's welcome, their actions having struck a crippling blow against the Breen menace. But for Jason, the victory was ashes in his mouth. He stared numbly at the jubilant faces around him, their joy a mockery of the hollow ache in his chest. In the days that followed, a somber ceremony was held to honor the fallen. Philip was posthumously awarded the Star of Terror, the highest military decoration. As the medal was pressed into Jason's hand, the weight of his father's legacy settled onto his shoulders. He stood before the assembled ranks of grim-faced soldiers, men and women who had seen too much death, too much loss. In their eyes, he saw the same steely determination that had driven his father, the unbreakable will to fight on, no matter the odds. Jason's fingers tightened around his father's rifle, the weapon heavy with the ghosts of battles past. He stepped forward, taking his place at the head of the formation. The war was far from over, and the road ahead would be stained with blood and sacrifice. But as he looked out over the sea of resolute faces, Jason knew that he would not falter, would not rest until humanity was safe. He would fight on, for his father, for the fallen, for the future. No matter the cost? You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.